Reading the emergency alert on my phone, my heart sank. I just had 2.5 hours to make it to the nearest bomb shelter. Those creatures relentlessly pounding on the attic access panel and only the small attic window as an escape option. My chances of making a safe escape stood at almost 0%, but I wasn't about to give up. The nearest bomb shelter I knew of was nowhere near where I lived. There's no way knowing how many of those creatures were roaming around outside. I wouldn't stand a chance of making it there on foot. I'd need a car. But my car is in the garage and my keys are, or they were, in a bowl where I'd leave them by the front door. It'd be far too risky to go back into the house if I managed to escape, as I'm sure I would need time to find them considering the state of just my bedroom, and the time is something that I don't have a lot of. Thinking through the different scenarios in my head, immediately I remembered one of my neighbors, Craig, stopping me on a morning run a while back and telling me about how he preps for the end of the world. Something I definitely thought he was crazy for at the time, and forgot about almost completely not long after he told me. I never thought anything like this would ever happen. He told me that he had a bunker installed under his house about a year ago with enough food to last a family of 4 for a year, despite him living alone. His house is a couple down from mine, but I never actually saw anything being installed. At this point, though, this was the only chance that I had to make it somewhere survivable before the bombs hit. I needed to get to his place as soon as possible, and I had only one option of getting out of the attic. Immediately, I made my way over to the attic window. It was small, but slid open in its entirety from the bottom, so I guess I would manage to squeeze out. Luckily, I never had security bars installed on it. I needed to do this without alerting any of those creatures if they were still any outside of the house. Whether they could climb or scale the house or not, I prayed for the latter. I popped the window open slightly and peeked out. The window faced towards the neighbor's house, and in the same direction I needed to go. The way the house was designed meant that I could lower myself onto the roof of the lower level of the house once I got outside and not have to drop all the way to the ground. Probably seriously injure myself in the process. From the window, I couldn't immediately see any of the creatures in the vicinity. I forced the window open as far as it could go and propped the leg up and out. Once one of my legs were out, I hunched down and moved the rest of my body through the opening, following my other leg. Holding onto the windowsill, I faced the wall and lowered myself slowly till my feet met the roof on the lower floor. The roof tiling was solid. I didn't trust myself enough to not slip and fall off, so I lowered my body onto all fours and I crouched down. From here, I could definitely be seen from the street whether I was crouching or not, so I immediately moved forward towards the back of the house. I guessed that it would be a lot more likely that there would be more of those creatures on the street rather than in my backyard. I was right. I scanned the backyard from my vantage point and didn't see any of the creatures. However, I could still hear the creatures pounding on the attic panel, which would likely attract more of those things if they were attracted to the sounds. This also meant those ones were still preoccupied, and I still had time before they figured out that I wasn't up there anymore. I carefully made my way towards the gutter pipe, which traversed the length of the house from top to bottom, and made one final scan before lowering myself onto it. Sliding down the pipe, I tried my best to stay quiet. However, the worst thing that could possibly happen at that point occurred. The fixture that secured the pipe onto the wall came loose. As the screws tore from the wall, the pipe came along with me and came crashing down onto the concrete pavement. Slamming into the ground, the air immediately left my lungs. I tried breathing in again, but I couldn't. I knew I had no time to mess around, and those creatures would have likely heard the commotion. I managed my way to my feet and forced myself towards the side of the house, away from the back door. At this point, my breath came back to me, but the pain in my back ached immensely, and I collapsed against the house. That fall definitely left a mark, and if this were any other time, I would probably have laid down and called for help. But help wasn't coming. I realized the pounding sound in the attic I was hearing had stopped, and my heart sunk once more. They were coming. I picked myself up again and started moving. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, and knew a wasted second could be the difference between surviving this ordeal and being torn apart in a few moments. I needed to stay out of sight, so my first instinct was to scale the fence in front of me. The pain in my back throbbed, but my will to live grew stronger. I jumped up and grabbed a hold of the top of the fence, holding on tightly. Pulling myself up, I thanked myself for working out regularly, which granted me increased upper body strength. I propped my leg up onto the fence and worked to pull the rest of my body up and over. My way down on the other side, however, was far from graceful. As I pulled my body over the fence, my descent was halted by my shoe getting caught in a loose screw protruding from the top of the fence. Tugging on my shoe, it came loose from the nail. I fell onto a bush directly below me on the other side. While my descent wasn't graceful, it also wasn't too loud. However, this was no time to be hopeful, and I immediately brought myself to my feet and moved towards my next-door neighbor's house. It was probably safer to move between backyards and scaling fences than it was to expose myself to the street, where other creatures likely lay waiting. Craig's house was just the next door over, so I wasn't far now. I could hear creatures scurrying around in my backyard behind the fence that I had to climb. They weren't smashing through the fence or jumping over it yet, so I thanked my lucky stars. I didn't know the family who lived directly next to me, but the state of the house left little to the imagination about their fate. The house had the same security features as mine, from what I could see. But most of the back windows were broken, and the screen door looked like it had been completely torn open like mine. But the house stood silent right now. I moved towards the fence on the opposite side of the yard, the one that they shared with Craig, and quickly peeked over after scanning down the side of the house for any of the creatures. The coast was clear, but a wave of despair rushed over me when I saw that Craig's house, too, had taken a beating. It seemed like no house on my street had been left untouched by this point, and I was just one of the lucky ones who was targeted last. Without knowing the full behavior of these creatures, there could very well be one of them still lurking inside his house. It also dawned on me that it was likely Craig had already entered and sealed the bunker that he had built for exactly this type of scenario. Whether or not this was the case, it was still my last hope. I'd rather die trying than die doing nothing at all. Whilst his house was beaten like the others on the street, Craig's yard was clear. I made my way over the fence like I had the other, but this time being more careful not to get snagged. I stayed low to the fence, not wanting the creatures in my yard or anywhere else to catch a glimpse of me, and landed safely on the other side with a quiet thud on the bare dirt. The house was about the same size as mine, but I'd never actually been inside, so the location of Craig's bunker was still to be determined. The upside of his house already being invaded meant that I wouldn't have to do any breaking and entering myself. Just entering. The back door had been torn completely off its hinges and lay on the ground outside the entrance. I moved towards the house and listened carefully for any sounds inside. The only sound I could hear was a banging from the direction of my house. That's when I realized. It sounded like the creatures were pounding on the fence I had first scaled. I didn't know what caused them to come in this direction, maybe just dumb luck, but I knew that it wouldn't be long before they made their way towards me. I moved the handgun from my belt and I raised it in front of me before moving swiftly into the open doorway with light footsteps, avoiding making unnecessary sounds that would likely be heard from anyone or anything that remained inside. My plan was to look for a basement. I guess this was the most likely place. A hidden bunker would be situated inside a house. The back door entry led directly into a laundry area, where shattered glass was strewn across the floor. Directly connected to this was the kitchen, which I scoped out carefully before entering. The glass on the floor made me very cautious of where I placed my foot. The large pieces of glass would likely not be quiet if shattered further. A loud sound bellowed from outside, making my heart skip a beat. It sounded as if the fence had been bowled over and hit the ground. I had no time to waste if they were getting closer already. I quickly moved through the kitchen and made my way into an open living room. The furniture had been completely torn apart. The floor was littered with bits and pieces of wood, glass, and other miscellaneous materials. A number of doors led out of this room, any of which could be hiding a way down. However, a door on the corner had clearly been torn through, leaving a large creature-sized gap in its wake. I made this assumption that this was likely where Craig had fled to, which hopefully meant this was the way down to a basement of some sort. More cautiously than ever, I walked towards the battered door, and as I entered the room, the lack of light caused my eyes to readjust. A staircase leading down was the first sign that I had been right. I stood silently for a while, while my eyes slowly adjusted themselves to the darkness. There's no use going down into a basement that I couldn't see a thing in. When I could make out the bottom of the staircase, I carefully moved down, but when I was halfway down the staircase, I saw it. Human remains covered the floor. Blood splatters covered the walls and the ceiling. A large pool of blood was situated in the corner of the room where Craig's mangled body laid. Huge pieces of flesh had been torn out. My stomach turned and I doubled over, dropping my gun and forcefully expelling the small amount of food that I had consumed earlier. The sight was horrific. I couldn't believe that I had actually seen something so graphic. The world around me went mute for a moment as I processed the situation, but a deafening bang came from above me and snapped me out of my daze. The sight of Craig's body had narrowed my vision, but what appeared to be a solid metal door that was slightly ajar came into view near where his body remained. He was just a little too late. I sprinted towards the door and I slammed my body into it, opening it wide enough to fit through. Something clattered down the stairs behind me, and I glanced back, and once again I saw that gross creature, its large eyes staring deep into my soul. It was coming towards me faster than I had imagined, and my gun remained at the bottom of the staircase where I had so foolishly dropped it. Without thinking, I heaved the door closed with all of my strength. I spun the handle. The sound of the creature slamming into the door could be heard as the metal bolts locked the door in place. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and thank you for watching tonight's video. I want to talk to you about one quick thing before we get into the real outro here, and that's going to be the Australian fires that are currently taking place. I'm pretty sure everybody has seen on their social media or on the news or what have you about what's taking place in Australia right now. The fires are raging out of control. There's something like 1.5 million acres that are currently on fire. It's pushing animals towards extinction, forcing people out of their homes. Many of them YouTubers and other creepypasta narrators that you probably listen to here. But one thing that actually kind of gets to me is that there's a lot of awareness about what's taking place down there. There's a lot of photos and videos I'm pretty sure that you've all seen, but nobody's really talking about where you can go to be able to donate, to be able to help either firefighters or relief funds or anything like that. And that's what I want to try to bring to you guys, or at least have you guys try to share around, even if you're not able to donate. If you look in the description down below, there's 4 different links there that I'm going to have on the videos for the next couple of weeks. And hopefully we can, and I mean all of you, can be able to share this around, and all of us together can be able to actually get some more eyes on where we can be able to go to help. I mean, yeah, we're a group of people that likes horror stories, horror movies, horror what have you, but I think one thing we can do that's at least powerful for us is we have the ability to minimize the amount of horror in real life. So, thank you guys so much for watching or listening. If you're listening to this on the podcast, available on Spotify and on Apple and on SoundCloud and on Google or wherever you get your podcasts from. Or if you're listening on the podcast, then thank you for watching on YouTube and subscribing to Mr. Creepypasta. And a very big thank you to my patrons from patreon.com/MrCreepypasta, such as Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Chompski, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Stephanie VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, G Weevil 3, Diane Kraus, Asia, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, Nico, kaeo, Kaleb Dougal, Daniel Poulsen, Dante Rowe, The Lastbladesong, TheGingerBroz, Don Meulmeester, Eliminator86, Nebsky, Sky Harbor, Finley, SteampunkSinner, Raphael Rodriguez, and OptimisticAvacado. You guys are the MVPs, and everybody down there in the description, a big thank you to you guys as well. Sweet dreams, everybody.